My mom slid the papers across the kitchen table, right next to a brochure for her new property. "If you actually cared about your brother, Julian," she said, her voice entirely flat, "you'd cover his tuition. Your father and I just stretched ourselves thin buying our place. It's your turn to step up." I looked at the paperwork, then looked at her. "I remember you making me pay for my own internet bandwidth when I was 15. I'm 31 now, but to understand why I didn't blink before saying no, you have to look at how we grew up. In our house, love wasn't unconditional, it was a ledger. Every meal, every ride to school, every basic necessity came with an invisible price tag. My parents kept a running scoreboard in their heads, waiting months or years to bring up a past favor like a receipt they expected you to settle. You learn early that you don't owe anyone anything if you can help it. Money wasn't tight. My parents did well enough, but every extra dollar they had was funneled directly into my younger brother, Kevin. He was 3 years younger, and from day one, he was the center of their universe. High-end gadgets, expensive summer camps, designer clothes, they never hesitated. For me, if it wasn't a bare essential, the answer was always the same: find a way to pay for it yourself. So I did. While Kevin was playing video games on a custom-built PC my parents bought him, I was fixing laptops for neighbors and doing basic data entry for local businesses. It wasn't glamorous, but it bought me my own tech gear and, more importantly, my independence. By the time I finished high school, I had enough saved to pay for my own certifications and community college. My dad actually mocked me for it, saying I thought I was too good for the family because I didn't ask for their help. I just kept my mouth shut. That was the gap that only grew wider over the next decade. While I was pulling 90-hour weeks learning cybersecurity, Kevin was finding himself, which usually meant burning through my parents' cash on whatever trend he thought would make him rich without working. I spent my 20s climbing the ladder in cybersecurity. It meant grueling hours, but it paid off. Last year, after catching a massive security breach for a major tech firm, I received a bonus that changed everything. I didn't buy a flashy car. I bought a commercial duplex. It was a solid building with a storefront on the ground floor and a living space above. My plan was to live upstairs and lease the bottom to a local business for passive income. Stupidity made me invite my parents and Kevin over to see it before a renovation started. We stood on the empty ground floor, our footsteps echoing against the raw concrete. I expected a simple "congratulations." Instead, my mother's eyes were already measuring the walls, calculating. "This is perfect," she said, turning to Kevin, who was nodding like he already owned the place. Then she looked back at me. "Kevin needs a proper office for his new trading business. He needs to look professional to attract investors. You're in IT, Julian. You just need a laptop in a corner of your bedroom upstairs. You should sign the lease for this floor over to him for free." I let out a dry laugh, waiting for the punchline. It never came. "No," I said flatly. "I'm leasing this out to a real business. Kevin can find his own space." The atmosphere turned instantly cold. My dad stepped up, his jaw clenched. "He's your brother, Julian. You're standing here flaunting your money while he's trying to get on his feet, and you won't even lend a hand? You've gotten arrogant." Kevin just leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching my parents do his dirty work with a smug look on his face. "The tour is over," I said, walking toward the door and holding it open. "Get out." The silence didn't last. Within 48 hours, the family network was weaponized against me. My aunt sent me a screenshot of a message Kevin had blasted to every relative we had. He had spun a pathetic story about how I promised him the storefront to launch his business, only to pull the rug out at the last second out of pure jealousy. The comments underneath from uncles and cousins were completely synchronized. Money changes people. Julian always thought he was better than us. Family should come first. A day later, I was quietly removed from the family group chat. I didn't try to defend myself. I just blocked Kevin and muted my parents. But you can't mute a process server. 2 weeks later, a man in a plain polo shirt knocked on my door and handed me a thick manila envelope. I sat at my kitchen table and read through the legal jargon. My parents were suing me in civil court. The basis of the lawsuit was so ridiculous I had to read it twice. Their lawyer argued that because my parents had charged me technology and infrastructure fees, their petty internet taxes from when I was a teenager, they had acted as the initial investors in my career. The suit claimed those child
childhood payments established a shared family enterprise, which legally entitled me to a 50% equity stake in my new duplex. It was a desperate, fabricated shakedown, but it was on legal head-to-head. It meant I had to hire a lawyer and spend thousands of dollars just to defend what was already mine. The real escalation happened a week later. I was at my desk conducting a security audit when my phone rang. It was Mark, the contractor I hired to renovate the ground floor storefront. "Hey, Julian," Mark said, his voice hesitant. "We're about to start demoing the front display windows like your project manager requested, but I wanted to double-check the billing for the new bar and lounge installation. It's a huge change from the original retail blueprint." My hand froze on my mouse. "What project manager, Mark?" "Your mom," Mark said, sounding confused. "She came by the site yesterday morning. She said she was handling the logistics for you. She handed us a new set of layout designs and brought a copy of a signed lease showing Kevin's company as the tenant." I told Mark to stop all work immediately, lock the physical site, and wait for me. When I got to the duplex, my chest was tight. Mark handed me the document my mother had left behind. It was a commercial lease agreement. It looked entirely authentic. It had my full legal name, my old childhood address, and my social security number printed at the top. At the bottom was a signature that looked almost exactly like mine. It was a 15-year commercial lease for the entire ground floor, locked in at $0 a month, granted to Kevin's LLC. I stared at the paper as the reality settled in. My mother had kept a folder of my old tax documents and ID cards from when I lived in her house. She hadn't just lied to the contractor. She used my personal data to commit forgery. She used that forged document to register Kevin's business at my property address with the city, trying to create a legal tenancy before we even stepped foot in the courtroom. They weren't just playing the victim anymore. They were actively trying to hijack my property, betting that I would be too weak to stop them because they were my parents. I looked at the fake signature, took a slow breath, and called my attorney. This wasn't a family drama anymore. It was a crime. I didn't call my mother to scream at her. I didn't text Kevin. When you work in cybersecurity, you learn that responding to a breach with emotion only compromises your position. You don't panic. You isolate the threat. I instructed Mark to change the locks on the duplex immediately and installed high-definition security cameras covering every square inch of the perimeter. Then, I went completely dark. If my parents called, it went to voicemail. If they texted, it was archived without a reply. I became a ghost to them, letting my lawyer handle every piece of formal communication. But while I was silent on the outside, I was digging on the inside. First, I needed to deal with the forged lease. My lawyer obtained the digital copy that had been uploaded to the city's business registry. Since it was a PDF, I ran it through a basic metadata analysis tool. The results were clear. The document had been created on a retail version of Microsoft Word registered to my father's personal email address. Even better, the electronic submission to the city registry carried an IP address that matched the router at my parents' house. They hadn't even used a VPN. They had left their digital fingerprints all over a felony. Next, I turned my attention to Kevin. I knew he was irresponsible, but forgery suggested desperation. I used my training in open-source intelligence to look into his public footprint. I didn't hack anything. I simply pulled public court registries, corporate filings, and lien records. What I found explained everything. Kevin's trading business wasn't just a failure, it was a black hole. He'd been trading high-leverage crypto margins on an unregulated offshore platform. 6 months ago, the market took a sharp downturn, and his entire portfolio was liquidated. He hadn't just lost his own money, he had lost cash he'd borrowed from some incredibly aggressive private lenders. Then, I looked into my parents' financial records. I pulled the public deed registry for the new house my mother had been bragging about during our last conversation. They hadn't just stretched themselves thin to buy it. 2 months after purchasing the home, they had taken out a massive high-interest second mortgage against it. They hadn't used that money for the house. They had used it to bail Kevin out of his first round of debts. Now, the second mortgage was defaulting. The private lenders were still coming after Kevin, and my parents were on the verge of losing everything. They didn't want my storefront for a business office. They needed a clean, unencumbered asset they could immediately leverage or sell to pay off the banks before their own home was foreclosed on. To them, my duplex wasn't my hard-earned achievement. It was their escape hatch. I sat in the dark of my home office, the blue light of the monitor reflecting off my desk. For years, I had felt like the outsider, the son who had to earn his keep while Kevin got a free pass. Now, I realized how deep the rot actually went. They were willing to put a fraudulent lease on my property and drag me into a civil court just to protect the golden child from the consequences of his own stupidity. I saved every file, exported the metadata reports into a clean PDF, and emailed the entire package to my lawyer. "What's the play?" he asked me over the phone the next morning. I told him, "We don't say a word. Let them keep thinking their lawsuit is working. Let them think I'm hiding in fear. We'll show our hand when it hurts them the most."
The pretrial settlement conference took place in a small windowless room that smelled of stale coffee. My parents sat on the opposite side of the long laminate table, Kevin sandwiched between them. My mother wore a practiced look of deep disappointment. Kevin was leaning back, tapping his fingers on the wood, entirely confident. Their lawyers spoke first, laying out their demands. He pointed to the forged lease agreement. "Our clients are willing to drop the equity claim on the building if Julian honors the existing 15-year commercial lease for the ground floor storefront." My lawyer didn't even look at the paper. He opened his briefcase and slid 3 separate folders across the table. "We won't be honoring anything," my lawyer said quietly. "First, here are the certified bank records from over a decade ago, showing Julian fully reimbursed his parents for every dollar of internet utility costs. There was no family investment. It was a paid transaction." My dad's jaw tightened. "Second," my lawyer continued, opening the next folder, "this is a forensic digital analysis of the lease you just submitted. The file's metadata shows it was created on a computer registered to your home email, and the IP address used to upload it to the city registry belongs to your router. Your clients forged my client's signature using stolen identity data." The opposing lawyer froze. He looked at the document, then turned to my mother, his face suddenly tense. "Is this true?" he whispered. My mother didn't answer. Her eyes darted around the room, the color completely draining from her face. "And finally," my lawyer said, dropping the third folder, "this is the public record of your impending foreclosure and Kevin's private debt. This lawsuit wasn't about an investment. It was an organized attempt to commit fraud to liquidate an asset belonging to your son." The room went dead silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner. The opposing lawyer pulled his briefcase closer, looking at my parents with pure anger. He realized they had lied to him and dragged him into a mess. He leaned over, whispering sharply into my dad's ear. Kevin finally stopped tapping his fingers. He looked at my mother, his voice cracking. "Mom, what do we do?" Their lawyer straightened up, his tone clipped. "We need 10 minutes outside." They walked out. When they returned, my parents wouldn't look at me. Their lawyer did the talking. "Our clients will unconditionally withdraw the lawsuit, with each party covering their own fees." "No," I spoke up for the first time, my voice completely level. "You will pay my legal fees in full, sign a formal waiver releasing any future claim to my property, and void the fake lease with the city today. Otherwise, my lawyer walks these folders straight to the police station." My mother looked at me, her mouth opening slightly in shock. She nodded slowly. They signed the agreement right there. The wire transfer for my legal fees cleared 48 hours later. Once the court paperwork was officially stamped and finalized, I didn't call anyone to celebrate. I simply took the digital forensics report, the signed withdrawal of the lawsuit, and emailed the files to my aunt and the few relatives who had cut me off. I didn't write a long, emotional explanation. I just attached the documents with a short note. This is what actually happened. The shift was quiet but immediate. The defensive text messages from my extended family stopped. In their place came awkward apologies and tentative invitations to Sunday dinners. I didn't reply to any of them. The point wasn't to punish them or win them back. I just wanted them to look at the evidence and realize exactly who they had chosen to believe.
Without my property to use as collateral, the clock finally ran out for my parents. Their second mortgage defaulted, and their new house went into foreclosure a few months later. They had to downsize to a rented two-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. Kevin's trading business vanished into thin air. From what I heard through a cousin, he finally had to take a regular job working shifts at a local distribution warehouse just to keep his lenders at bay. The smug confidence he had carried into that windowless conference room was entirely gone. My contractor finished the renovations on the ground floor last month. I leased the storefront to a couple who opened a small artisanal coffee shop and bookstore. Every morning I wake up to the faint, warm smell of roasting coffee beans and the quiet murmur of neighborhood customers downstairs. Sometimes I stand on my upstairs balcony in the evening, watching the street ramps turn on. I think about being 15 years old, counting wrinkled dollar bills just to pay my own parents for the right to use the internet. I think about how hard they tried to make me believe that my success was a debt I owed them. But as I step inside and lock my door, the quiet of the space feels absolute. Everything under this roof was built on my terms, and nobody can write a receipt for that.